So I'm gonna be honest with you right away. I wish I was one of those people who had the skill, the time to get that skill, and honestly the money to go all in on serious sim racing. You know, the type of full rig with triple monitors and hours mastering tracks and dialing in setups and racing competitively online. That's a whole world I'd love to be a part of, but I just don't have that time to grind. I'm not good enough yet to be competitive in hardcore sims, and at the moment I definitely don't have the budget to keep up with it either. So when something like iRacing Arcade comes along, something that promises a more accessible pick up and play version of that experience, I'm immediately interested. And after spending some time with it, I've got to say, I actually quite like it. Now, that doesn't mean it's perfect, of course, no, it's not close. And there are some very real issues here, especially if you've played Circuit Superstars or you're expecting a full-featured racing experience. But I do think there's something here that people are overlooking. So in this video, I'm just going to go through it all, gameplay, visuals, sound, AI, so on, all of it, and explain why, despite its flaws, I think that iRacing Arcade is still worth your time. Obviously depending on what you're looking for. So let's start with the most important thing in pretty much any racing game, and that is how it actually feels to drive. And this is where iRacing Arcade actually gets a lot right. The handling is smooth, predictable, and honestly it's just a lot of fun. It strikes a really nice balance between arcade and simulation. It's not overly punishing, but it still feels like you need to respect braking zones, racing lines, and throttle control. It's the kind of game where you can jump in for a quick race and feel competitive almost immediately, but there's still enough depth there so that you can improve over time. The slipstream system is also pretty good, it doesn't feel overpowered or gimmicky, it just adds a bit of strategy. You'll be bunched up, thinking when's best to deploy that action, whether to defend or attack, and it gives races a bit more variation. And across the different cars, the handling stays consistent, and by that I mean it's good across all the cars. They handle differently, but it still feels good to drive all of them. Nothing feels completely broken or wildly different in a bad way. But there is a catch. If you've played Circuit Superstars, you might feel like something is slightly off. That game's top-down perspective worked perfectly with its physics, and here, with the shift to a 3D chase camera, it sometimes feels like the driving model hasn't fully adapted. It's still good, but it just doesn't feel as tight or as natural as its predecessor. So, overall, solid, enjoyable, but certainly not genre-defining. Now, before we talk about my biggest problem with the game, if you haven't done so already, please consider hitting that like button, and if you want to stay up to date with future uploads, then please consider hitting that subscribe button and tapping the bell for notifications. It all really helps out. Anyway, thanks for listening to me selling myself to you. Let's talk about the biggest issue with the game, and that's the AI. At its best, the AI provides close racing and keeps things competitive, but way too often, it completely falls apart. You'll get races where all 11 cars are just bunched together, moving like a pack, barely reacting to what the player is doing. They don't really race you, they just kind of follow their own line. And sometimes they can't even handle that properly. You'll see weird mistakes, awkward braking, and moments where they just don't seem to understand the track. But the bigger issue is how aggressive they are. And not in a good way. They'll happily push you off the track, block aggressively, and turn races into what feels like bumper cars. Trying to overtake on the outside, good luck, there's a high chance you're getting forced wide, or straight up punted off the track. It crosses the line from fun arcade chaos, contact kind of sport into, this is just absolutely ridiculous. There are also smaller issues that do add up. They don't really use the slipstream effectively, they don't seem to take damage, and their difficulty feels inconsistent depending on the class. And the biggest problem of all, there's no real alternative. No ranked matchmaking, no public lobbies, so if the AI isn't fun, or you don't have a friend, you're kind of stuck. This is the area that needs improvement the most. I've spent most of my playthrough on the master level difficulty, and it's really baffling how different that difficulty can feel from race to race and class to class. Sometimes I'd be seconds ahead and finish way ahead of everyone else. Other times I couldn't even reach the front and kept getting smacked around. There doesn't really seem to be an in-between, so hopefully the devs will work on the AI consistency a bit. Okay, I know the video is literally called I Like iRacing Arcade, and I've probably been quite negative so far, but just bear with me just a little bit longer. So let's talk about the content. Content-wise is where opinions are definitely going to be split. Let's at least start with the positives. The tracks are actually really solid, there's a decent selection of licensed circuits, plus a couple of returning fictional ones. They're varied enough to keep things interesting, even if, as far as I'm aware, each one only has a single layout. Visually and structurally, they're well done. But then we get to the cars, and this is where things feel just a little bit underwhelming, in my opinion. You're looking at a very small selection, quite literally a handful of vehicles, that don't really capture the variety you might expect, especially when compared to Circuit Superstars, which had everything from muscle cars to trucks to buggies. This just feels like a bit of a step back. Here it's mostly generic categories, a couple of road cars, some open wheelers, a touring car. That's kind of it. It's not that the cars are bad, they're fine to drive, but there's just not enough of them. There's literally 8 different cars. So while the track selection holds up reasonably well, the car roster definitely feels limited. Now, on the topic of content, iRacing Arcade did receive its first patch just last week. And in that patch, obviously they covered everything they'd fixed, but they did also just mention to say that they were working on new upcoming content, so hopefully they will add more vehicles and more racing categories as time goes on. Anyway, enough moaning, let's talk about the career mode, because this is where the game really surprised me. The career mode is genuinely one of the best parts of the entire experience. Instead of just being a series of races, it actually gives you some freedom in how you play. You progress through seasons, unlock championships, and decide how involved that you actually want to be. You can race everything yourself, build a team and delegate races to AI drivers, and you can just skip events you're not interested in. That flexibility is great. There's also a management layer where you hire drivers, manage cars, and decide whether to invest in your own fleet or rely on rentals. And then there's the campus system. You expand your team headquarters by building garages, R&D facilities, and unlocking perks, and this part is interesting, but it's also just a little bit undercooked. It looks nice, but it's mostly cosmetic. You're not walking around, you're not interacting with it in a meaningful way. It's kind of just like a menu with some extra steps. However, it does add a bit of personality to the progression overall. And the boost/perk system ties into this nicely, giving you small gameplay advantages like extra grip, more power, some better fuel management. Some of them are serious and some are just fun, like the big head mode. Overall, the career mode does a really good job of keeping you engaged over time. Now, in terms of visuals, the game is pretty appealing. It goes for a stylized, slightly cartoony look, and it works. The tracks are detailed, they're colourful, and they're easy to read while racing. Cars look clean, and the overall presentation is polished enough to feel like a complete product. It's not exactly pushing graphical boundaries, but it certainly doesn't need to. Everything is clear, it's smooth, and it's consistent, which is exactly what you want in a racing game like this. There are a few missing features though. There's no proper photo mode, limited replay options, and you can't even hide the UI to take clean screenshots. These aren't deal breakers, but they do make the game feel a bit less complete than it could be. As well as decent visuals, the sound is also solid, it's just not particularly memorable. Engine sound is decent across the different cars, and there's enough variation that makes them feel distinct. The overall audio mix does its job. Nothing feels out of place, but nothing really stands out either. It's one of those areas where you won't complain, but you probably won't praise it very much either. Now, there are a few things that feel like obvious omissions in this game. There's no split screen, which genuinely I was baffled by and had to go and double check. Why is it not here? It'd be perfect for this kind of game. There's no ranked multiplayer, there's no proper replay or photo tools, and although there is some customization, to be honest, it's quite limited. Individually, these aren't massive problems, but together, alongside the issues with the AI, they do make the game feel like it's missing that final layer of polish. So with all of that said, why do I still like iRacing Arcade? Well, because at its core it delivers exactly what I personally want from a racing game. It's accessible, it's easy to jump into, it has that kind of one more race effect on me that I haven't seen for a little while, and I ended up spending way too much time playing the game. It doesn't demand hours of practice just to be competitive, and it still feels like racing, not just mindless driving. And yeah, the AI does have issues, but when you hit that sweet spot and they decide to not be completely moronic or over-aggressive, the racing is so much fun. The gameplay loop is engaging, the career mode adds some good depth, and the driving itself is enjoyable enough to keep coming back. So yes, the AI needs serious work, yes, the content is a little bit limited, especially on the car front, and yes, it could have been something much bigger, but it may still become something much bigger with updates in the future. And for someone like me, someone who doesn't have the time or resources to go full into sim racing, this game hits a really nice middle ground. So if you're expecting a full-blown racing sim alternative, this probably isn't it. But if you're looking for something more relaxed, approachable, and still genuinely quite fun, you might end up liking it more than you expect. Let me know what you think. Have you tried iRacing Arcade yet? Are you going to, or are you not going to? Share all your thoughts in the comments down below. And as always, if you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to leave a like, and if you haven't done so already, please consider hitting that subscribe button. A massive shout out to my Patreon subscribers for the continued support, and all I really have left to say is thank you, and goodbye.